Welcome everyone to part 4 of our 10-part explainer, IPv6 Transition, Scaling the Modern Global Network, an introduction for the IT professional. If you are an IT professional with a solid grasp of the networking basics and you're gearing up to support your organization's migration from IPv4 to IPv6, you are absolutely in the right place. Okay, let's dive right into this. Today, we are mapping out the journey from the burning platform of IPv4 to the promised land of a truly IPv6 native architecture.
Everything we are unpacking today is drawn straight from Chapter 4 of the comprehensive guide provided by Virtualization Options, LLC. They're a Colorado-based technology research, education, and advisory organization. And this explainer is specifically designed to help organizations like yours migrate efficiently, securely, and hopefully without the usual headaches.
So here is our roadmap for today. 1. The IPv4 exhaustion problem. 2. NAT, the costly band-aid. 3. IPv6 architecture and efficiency. 4. Bridging the gap, tunneling. 5. Securing the IPv6 network. And 6. Your IPv6 action plan.
Section 1. The IPv4 exhaustion problem.
Let's set the stage a bit and rewind to 1981. RFC 791 drops, officially defining IPv4 for what was essentially a tiny academic research network. I mean, it was packet-switched, connectionless, and offered best-effort delivery with zero guarantees. Its simplicity was absolute genius for the time. But no one, literally no one, anticipated that by the 1990s, this modest little research tool would completely blow up into the commercial backbone of global communication. And because of that massive, frankly unexpected scale, by 2011, the global IPv4 address pool was completely bone dry, completely depleted.
And this number right here hits the nail on the head as to why. 4,294,967,296. That is the exact number of unique addresses you get from IPv4's 32-bit architecture. Now back in '81, over 4 billion addresses seemed virtually infinite. But today, in a planet-scale internet flooded with billions of users, smartphones, and IoT devices, it is just woefully inadequate.
Section 2. NAT, the costly band-aid.
Enter Network Address Translation, or NAT. You know the drill. It magically makes an entire office of 500 people look like a single host to the outside internet. But let's be real for a second. NAT is not a solution. It's a massive, severe technical debt. Those NAT state tables just absolutely chew through memory and CPU. Troubleshooting NAT traversal is easily one of the biggest IT time sinks we deal with today. Worse yet, it fundamentally violates the internet's original end-to-end design principle. It completely breaks any app that embeds IP addresses right in its payload. Think peer-to-peer or VoIP apps using SIP or ACE323. We're constantly forced to rely on these incredibly complex ALG workarounds just to keep everything afloat.
Section 3. IPv6 architecture and efficiency.
40. I want you to remember this number. IPv6's base header is always exactly 40 bytes. That fixed length is a huge deal because it allows routers to process packets with totally predictable speed and efficiency even at a massive scale. Now, what's really interesting here is the contrast in processing. With IPv4, you're dealing with variable headers and the router literally has to recalculate the checksum at every single hop. It is clunky and it completely bogs things down. IPv6 says, scratch that, it drops the checksum entirely and uses that sleek, fixed 40-byte base header. Any of the optional stuff like routing options or security is all shoved into extension headers chained after the base header. And the best part? They're only processed by the destination host. It is an absolutely massive win for routing speed. As you get your hands dirty with IPv6, you're going to see these 3 foundational addresses all the time while you're troubleshooting. First up is the loopback address, which is just :1. That's your exact IPv6 equivalent of 127.0.0.1. Next is the unspecified address, just a : You'll see this before an address is actually assigned to an interface. And finally, the mixed notation, the IPv4 mapped IPv6 address. You're mostly going to see this internally in dual-stack operating systems and socket APIs. It never actually gets sent out on the wire like that, but you definitely need to know what it is. So how does this all build a more efficient network? Well, take fragmentation. In IPv4, if a packet is too large, the router has to burn precious resources breaking it down into fragments. IPv6 fundamentally flips the script on this. Routers just refuse to fragment, period.
If a packet is too big, the IPv6 router simply drops it and fires back an ICMPv6 packet too big message. The source host then has to adjust its size and retransmit using path MTU discovery. It completely shifts the heavy lifting off of your core routers.
And speaking of ICMPv6, here is a critical, absolutely non-negotiable operational shift. You know how IPv4 uses ARP broadcasts to map IPs to MAC addresses? Well, IPv6 completely throws ARP out the window and replaces it with NDP, Neighbor Discovery Protocol. NDP uses neighbor solicitation and advancement, which is entirely driven by ICMPv6. So here is the golden rule. Unlike IPv4, where blocking ICMP is pretty much standard practice, you must never block ICMPv6. No way. If you block it, you break NDP, you break path MTU discovery, and you break SLAAC. The whole IPv6 ecosystem completely depends on it to function.
Section 4. Bridging the gap. Tunneling. Okay, let's talk about the practical bridge between our legacy setups and the future, starting with 6in4, defined in RFC 4213. This is a manually configured tunnel where your IPv6 packets are encapsulated right inside an IPv4 header using protocol number 41. It's highly reliable, it's predictable, honestly, it's your go-to choice as long as you have control over the static IPv4 endpoints on both sides of the tunnel.
Then we have 6to4. This is an automatic tunneling method that uses a well-known anycast relay. I'm really only bringing this up so you know the lingo when you're digging through older documentation, but please hear me on this. It is officially deprecated. Just avoid using it in any modern deployments.
Now here is the real star of the transition, 464 XSLAT. Because, let's face it, we still have thousands of legacy apps that stubbornly hard-code IPv4 addresses. 464 XSLAT is an incredibly elegant translation framework to solve this. It uses a CLAT on the client side to translate the app's IPv4 traffic into IPv6. That traffic seamlessly traverses your pure IPv6 network, hits a PLAT, which is a provider-side NAT64 gateway, and gets translated right back to IPv4 for the legacy internet. The apps, they are completely blind to the fact that the underlying network is actually IPv6. It's fantastic because it entirely eliminates carrier-grade NAT, drastically reduces network complexity, and keeps everything fully backward compatible.
Section 5. Securing the IPv6 network.
All right, when it comes to security, locking down the first hop in an IPv6 topology is absolutely non-negotiable. Because hosts learn their prefix and their gateway from router advertisements, you have got to configure RA guard on all access switch ports facing your end users. If you don't, any rogue device can literally hijack your network routing. It's the same story with DHCPv6 guard. It blocks rogue servers from responding to clients on untrusted ports. And lastly, you simply cannot secure what you cannot see. So make sure your flow collectors, your SIM, and your NMS tools are explicitly configured to be IPv6 aware. Don't let your monitoring go blind during the transition.
Section 6. Your IPv6 action plan.
Let's get practical. Here is your concrete 3-step roadmap to take back to the office today. Step 1. Get on the phone with your ISP and confirm your IPv6 prefix delegation. You need to explicitly request a /48 allocation for your organization. The experts over at Virtualization Options LLC are crystal clear on this. Never, ever accept a /60. You will absolutely regret the lack of subnetting flexibility down the road. Step 2. Build out your addressing plan. Document your sites, buildings, and VLAN hierarchies on good old-fashioned paper before anyone even thinks about logging into a router. And Step 3. Train your team. Do not let your engineers touch the production environment until they truly, fundamentally understand how NDP, SLAC, and dual-stack operations differ from the IPv4 they're so used to.
Now, if you're sitting there wondering, can we just put this off for another year? Well, consider this. The transition isn't just coming, it is already happening. Right now, 45% of Google's global traffic and a staggering 95% of T-Mobile's network is already IPv6. Your users, your cloud providers, the major ISPs, and CDNs, they're all already there. Every single year you delay this migration is just another year of compounding technical debt, piling up in the form of increasingly complex, fragile NAT state tables. So, I'm going to leave you with one final thought. Are you going to keep drowning in the complex, expensive technical debt of endless IPv4 band-aids? Or are you ready to take the leap and build an IPv6 native infrastructure, where IPv4 becomes just a legacy compatibility layer? An infrastructure that scales, simplifies, and completely secures your network for the next decade. You have the knowledge and the roadmap now. The next move is entirely up to you. Thank you so much for tuning into this explainer, and we will see you in the next one.